Caleb looked out the window of the transport shuttle as it landed on the alien colony called Alaris. It was his first time stepping on another planet. Everything was new: the blue trees, the tall buildings with curved designs, and the soft yellow sky that made the world feel quiet and calm. He had come here as part of a human exchange program. The goal was to improve friendship between species, and Caleb had signed up to experience something different. What he didn't expect was to be assigned a roommate from another species. When he got the housing information, his heart beat a little faster. System showed. Roommate assigned. Species Filari. He didn't know much about the Filari, only that they were peaceful, furry, and graceful. They looked kind of like tall cats with humanoid features, large eyes, soft ears, and calm voices. He packed his bag and followed the directions to the shared housing block. The door to the apartment opened with a soft hiss. Caleb stepped inside and looked around. It was clean, quiet, and smelled faintly of flowers. Saw her sitting on the couch, her back straight, a warm drink in her hands. She stood up slowly and gave a polite nod. "I'm Laya," she said in a calm voice. "I'm Caleb," he replied with a small wave. "Nice to meet you." She nodded again but said nothing more. They had separate rooms, a shared kitchen, and a small living space. The first few days were quiet. Caleb didn't want to make her uncomfortable, so he gave her space. They shared basic chores. He cooked a few times, and she cleaned. They didn't talk much, just short greetings or quiet thanks, Caleb noticed. She spent a lot of time in her room. Sometimes he heard her whispering to someone over her cum. Other times she just sat in silence with a book. He didn't mind. Liked peace, and the colony was beautiful. He took walks during the day and sent updates to his family back on Earth. But then, one evening, things started to feel strange. He came home from a walk and found Leah standing in the kitchen staring at the window. She looked tense. Her ears were flat against her head, and her hands were shaking slightly. She turned around quickly when she saw him and stepped back. "Are you okay?" Caleb asked gently. She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "Please stay away for a few days." He blinked. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," she said quickly, almost too quickly. "Just, please, don't come near my room." Before he could ask more, she walked past him and locked her door. Caleb stood there, confused. The air felt heavy. He didn't know what was going on. Later that night, he heard strange sounds from her room, soft groans, like someone trying not to cry. He wanted to check on her, but remembered her words. So he stayed in his room and listened, worried. The next morning, the colony declared a solar storm warning. A strong energy wave was heading toward Alaris, and the colony would go into full lockdown for at least 5 days. No one could go outside. All housing units were sealed and doors locked automatically. Caleb stared at the announcement on his screen. 5 days, trapped inside with Leah. He took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen. Leah was already there, standing by the counter. Her eyes looked tired, and she avoided his gaze. "So, locked down?" he said softly, trying to sound casual. She nodded. "Are you feeling better today?" She shook her head. No. He waited, but she didn't say more. She poured herself some water, then went back to her room. Caleb sat at the table, staring at his hands. He was used to strange situations. Back home, he had dealt with noisy neighbors and power cuts. But this felt different. He wasn't scared, just confused. Something was clearly wrong, but he didn't want to push her. 2 days passed slowly. Laya barely left her room. Caleb cooked some basic meals and left plates outside her door. Sometimes they were taken, sometimes not. He started hearing more. Noises, whispers, low growls, and soft breathing like someone fighting something inside. It made him worry more. On the 3rd day, he finally searched online about Filari biology. What he found made him sit back in shock. Flailera had a seasonal instinct, a natural biological cycle that happened once a year. During that time, their emotions became stronger, their senses sharper, and their need for connection overwhelming. It wasn't dangerous, but it was private. Most Filari spent that time alone or with close family. Caleb felt his face grow warm. No wonder she asked him to stay away. But now they were locked in together, and she had no way to escape her own biology. He stood outside her door, holding a warm cup of tea. He didn't knock, just placed it down and whispered, "You don't have to go through it alone." There was silence then. Slowly the door opened, just a crack. Leah peeked out. Her eyes were glowing faintly, her fur ruffled, and her voice shaky. "Why are you being kind to me?" "'Cause I'd want someone to be kind to me," Caleb said simply. Her eyes searched his face for a long time. Then she opened the door wider and stepped back. "You can come in," she whispered. He stepped inside, careful and calm. The room was dark and quiet. The lights were dimmed, and soft music played in the background. She sat on the edge of her bed, holding the tea with both hands. "I didn't want you to see me like this," she said. "It's hard to control." "Not judging," Caleb replied. "I just want to help. Or at least, sit with you if you need someone." She stared at him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Thank you." And for the first time since they met, she smiled, not the polite kind, but a real soft one. In that moment, something began to shift. Caleb sat quietly near the corner of Leah's room. The air was warmer in here, almost like it carried emotion. Leah was curled up on her bed with her knees tucked close. Her hands held the cup of tea, and her breathing was soft but uneven. She had turned off most of the lights, leaving just a small lamp glowing beside her bed. "You didn't have to come in," she said after a while, her voice low and tired. "I know," Caleb replied, "but I couldn't just sit outside anymore." Leah closed her eyes and leaned back against the wall. "You're not scared?" "No," he said softly. "I'm more worried than scared." She looked at him with those deep, glowing eyes. "Worried for me?" He nodded. There was silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like the space was holding something gentle. Caleb watched her, not with fear or confusion, but with calm understanding. He had read more about the Filari mating season. It wasn't about danger. It was about emotions becoming too strong to handle alone. For some, it felt like drowning. "Does it hurt?" he asked quietly. Leah didn't answer right away. "Not the way you think. It's more like, my senses are too loud. Sounds feel sharper. Emotions feel heavier. Even your voice sits calming, but sometimes it makes my heart race." Caleb blinked. "My voice?" "Yes," she said, looking away. "You don't realize it, but you've been kind to me since day one. You didn't push, didn't stare. You smiled when I didn't know what to say. That kindness sticks in my mind. And now, it's harder to ignore." He leaned back, letting her words sink in. Leah took a deep breath. "I didn't plan for this. Most Filari prepare. We go home to be with family, or we isolate. But with the storm and the lockdown, I got stuck here." "With me?" Caleb said with a light smile. She gave a small laugh. "Yes, with you." He wanted to ask more, but he didn't want to push. Instead, he looked around the room. There were drawings on the wall, soft paintings of stars and moons. A few handmade decorations sat on the shelves. She had made this space hers, and yet he had never really noticed until now. "Can I ask something?" Caleb said gently. "Go ahead. What helps? I mean, what makes it easier?" Leah looked at her hands for a moment. Warmth, soft sounds, gentle conversation, things that don't overwhelm me. Caleb nodded. "Then let's do that." Spent the next hour just talking. Nothing deep or heavy. He told her funny stories from Earth about his little brother, who once got stuck in a vending machine trying to grab a candy bar. Leah laughed, and the sound was light and real. In return, she told him about her favorite tree on her homeworld. It was so tall, she said, that its top glowed with the night stars. Time passed slowly, but not painfully. Caleb stayed close, always giving her space, but never letting her feel alone. By the 4th day of lockdown, things between them had changed. Leah was still dealing with her emotions, but she wasn't hiding anymore. She came out of her room in the morning and sat at the table while Caleb cooked simple meals. They shared quiet breakfasts. And sometimes she'd close her eyes just to listen to the sound of his voice. "You really like talking, don't you?" she asked one day with a soft smile. Only when someone's listening, he joked. She chuckled. Then I'll listen.
Oh.
They started building little routines. He made tea in the evening and she picked the music. Even played board games left by a previous tenant. Caleb didn't understand all the rules, but Leah taught him with patience. It was the most he'd seen her smile since they met. But the mating season wasn't over yet. Sometimes she still struggled. Her hands would tremble. Her voice would shake. Caleb noticed the way her ears twitched when a sudden noise echoed through the walls. On one of those nights, she looked like she might cry. "Do you want to sit closer?" he asked carefully. She nodded, eyes full of emotion. Caleb moved beside her on the couch, not too close, but enough to be present. He didn't touch her, didn't speak, he just stayed. After a few minutes, she leaned gently against his shoulder. "You make it easier," she whispered. Caleb didn't move. "Then I'll keep doing that." They stayed like that for a long time. Later, Leah explained more. About her people, how bonding worked, how trust came first. She said most Falari never bonded with other species because it was rare to find someone who understood their emotions. But Caleb, with his calm presence and quiet care, was starting to feel like something more than just a human to her. What happens when the season ends? Caleb asked one evening. Leah looked thoughtful. Usually things go back to normal, but sometimes the feelings stay. "Do you want them to stay?" he asked. She looked at him, then softly nodded. "Maybe, but only if you do." Caleb smiled. "I think I do." A soft knock on the door pulled them out of the moment. It was the building's emergency system dropping off extra supplies, blankets, food, and emergency lights. The storm had grown stronger. The power might flicker more often. As they unpacked the supplies, Leah placed a soft blanket over Caleb's shoulders and smiled. "If the lights go out, you better keep talking," he laughed. "Deal." It was night. Fell. The wind outside howled gently against the walls, but inside, the small apartment felt warm. Two roommates, once strangers, now sat side by side under a blanket, sipping tea and telling stories. The season wasn't over yet, but something new had already begun. Caleb woke up to soft humming. It came from the kitchen. For a moment, he thought it was a dream, but then he sat up and realized it was real. He stepped out of his room and found Leah standing by the stove, gently stirring a pot of warm soup. The room smelled like herbs and something sweet. Her movements were slower, but more relaxed than before. "Morning," said quietly. She turned her head, gave a soft smile, and nodded. "You slept well? Yeah?" "Better than I expected," he replied. "You?" Leah looked thoughtful for a second. "Not perfect, but better. The storm's still strong, but I feel less overwhelmed today." They ate breakfast together in calm silence. The lights flickered once, but they didn't panic. Caleb had already set up emergency lamps the night before. Every time the storm made the building creak, Leah glanced toward the window. But Caleb always spoke gently to distract her. They had fallen into a strange rhythm to people stuck together, learning to share not just space but quiet feelings. Caleb found it easier to talk to Leah now. She listened deeply, like every word mattered. And Leah, though still guarded, began to open up more. "Back on my planet," she said, one afternoon, "we have something called still hours. No one speaks. No one moves fast. It's meant to help the heart rest." "I think Earth could use that," Caleb replied with a smile. They spent that day in still hours. No loud talking, just slow movement, soft music, and quiet tea. Caleb read a book. Leah sat nearby, sketching in her notebook. The peaceful time helped them both. But as the sun dipped and evening came, the quiet broke. Leah stood up quickly, knocking. Over her sketch pad, her breathing changed. Her hands trembled. "Are you okay?" Caleb asked, stepping forward. "No," she said, holding her head. "It's starting again, the pressure." "Do you need space?" She shook her head, then nodded, then shook again. "I don't know what I need." "Sit," Caleb said softly. She sat on the couch, hugging her knees. He sat beside her, keeping a small distance. The room grew quiet again, but the tension remained. She closed her eyes tightly, trying to steady her breathing. "It's not She said suddenly. It's just, everything inside me is loud. Caleb thought for a second. Want me to tell a story? Leia looked up slowly. Please. So Caleb spoke. He told her a silly story about a dog back on Earth that could skateboard. He described its wobbly legs, how it barked with joy, and how it once rolled straight into a fountain. Leia chuckled softly, and the tightness in her shoulders began to ease. Your stories help, she whispered. They make the noise fade. He continued. He talked about his grandmother's garden, about rain on tin roofs, about late-night talks with his younger brother. None of it was exciting. But it was human and warm. And that's what Leia seemed to need most. As the night deepened, she leaned gently toward him, resting her head near his shoulder, not touching, but close enough to feel his calm. Do you know what's strange? She asked quietly. What? Don't run away, should I? Leia smiled. Most would. Well, he said, I'm not most. She laughed again, soft and musical. Then she grew quiet. Caleb, she said slowly, this season, it's not just about biology. It opens emotions too. It makes us see things clearer, or maybe feel things stronger. And what are you feeling now? He asked gently. Safe, calm, and maybe something more. He didn't answer right away. His heart beat faster, but not with fear. Me too. They sat there, neither saying much after that. Words didn't seem needed. The quiet was enough. The warmth between them was enough. The next morning the storm warning remained, but the power stayed steady. Caleb made pancakes using emergency. Flour and powder mix. Leia sat at the table, watching him with gentle eyes. You're not just kind, she said. You're steady. I take that as a big compliment, Caleb said, flipping a pancake. Leia smiled, then looked down. Can I show you something? Of course. She led him to her room. On the wall was a drawing one he hadn't noticed before. It showed two figures standing under a star-filled sky. The other was human. They were looking at each other, not holding hands, just standing close. I made this before the season started, she said. I dreamed of something like this. Never thought it would be real. Caleb looked at the drawing, then at Leia. You drew hope? Leia looked surprised. Yes, I guess I did. For the rest of the day, they stayed close. Not in a romantic way, not yet, but in a way that said you mattered to me. As the wind outside howled and the stars vanished behind the clouds, two souls inside a small apartment found peace, not through answers, not through quiet understanding. Neither knew what would happen when the storm ended, but both knew something had already begun. The next morning started with quiet rain tapping against the window. It wasn't real rain, it was part of the colony's weather system. Still, it made the room feel peaceful. Caleb opened his eyes and stretched. He glanced at the couch where he had fallen asleep again. A soft blanket had been placed over him. He smiled, knowing Leia must have done it. He stood up and walked to the kitchen. The lights were dim, but the smell of warm herbs filled the air. Leia was already there, pouring tea into 2 cups. You always wake up before me, he said with a sleepy smile. Habit, she replied, and I like the quiet hours. They sat at the table, sipping tea without many words. Something about their silence felt full, not empty. It was as if words weren't always needed between them anymore. The storm outside had not passed. The colony's system sent out another update, 2 more days of lockdown. Supplies were still enough, and power was stable. The message warned everyone to remain indoors and avoid opening windows or doors. Caleb sighed. 2 more days. Leia nodded. I'm not surprised. This storm is stronger than usual. Looked at her carefully. How are you feeling? She didn't answer right away. Tired, she said finally. But not because of the season, because I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Nothing's gone wrong so far, he said. That's why I'm scared. She whispered. Caleb reached out slowly, placing his hand near hers, not touching, just close. We're okay, Leia. We're figuring it out together. At his hand, then at his face. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad I got stuck with you. He smiled. Me too. Later that day, the lights flickered again, and the temperature dropped. The backup heater turned on, but it only warmed the main room. Caleb brought out extra blankets. They moved the couch closer to the heater. Leah wrapped herself in a thick cover and leaned back. Caleb made soup again, this time with dried vegetables and noodles. While they ate, he told her about winter on Earth and how his family used to build snowmen and drink hot cocoa by the fire. Leah listened closely. I've never seen snow. You'd love it, Caleb said. Soft, cold, and beautiful. Like the whole world goes quiet for a while. Leah closed her eyes. That sounds peaceful. When they finished eating, Caleb pulled out an old puzzle he had found in a cabinet. It was missing some pieces, but they didn't mind. They sat on the floor, working together, talking quietly about small things, favorite colors, favorite smells, the kind of music they liked. Leah paused. When Caleb mentioned he liked soft piano music, Falari music doesn't use keys, she said. We use vibration and tones. I have a song saved on my device. Want to hear it? Yes, Caleb said with interest. She played a soft melody. It was deep and slow, like sound waves moving through water. It wasn't like human music at all. But it made Caleb feel calm. It feels like floating, he said. That's the idea, she replied with a small smile. They finished most of the puzzle before the lights dimmed again. They lit the emergency lamps and sat together on the couch. Outside, the wind made the walls groan, but inside, everything was still. Leah looked thoughtful. My season will end soon. Caleb turned his head. How do you know? I can feel it. Pressure's less now. My senses are settling. Still emotional, but it's different. He nodded. Do you feel okay about that? She hesitated. Yes and no. It means the storm inside me will calm, but it also means whatever we're feeling now, it'll either stay or fade. Caleb's heart beat a little faster. Do you want it to stay? Leah looked into his eyes. Yes. But only if it's real. Not just because of the season. It is real, he said softly. Shh. I didn't sit with you, talk to you, laugh with you just because something told me to. I did it because I wanted to. She smiled, a little sad and a little hopeful. And let's see what happens when the storm ends. They sat in silence for a while. Caleb looked at the window. The clouds were heavy, but he noticed a small break in the sky, a single star visible in the distance. Look, he said, pointing. Leah followed his gaze. Her eyes lit up. A star. Just one, he said. But maybe it means the storm's almost done. She leaned her head gently on his shoulder. I hope so. That night, they didn't talk much. They shared warm tea, sat close, and let the quiet wrap around them like a blanket. Something had changed between them, not because of instinct, not because of the storm, but because they had chosen to care. The next morning, a soft light slipped through the windows. For the first time in many days, Caleb noticed the sky had changed. The thick gray clouds were finally fading, and a golden glow began to cover the colony buildings. The storm was nearly over. He stepped into the kitchen and found Leah already awake, staring quietly outside. You see it too? Caleb asked. She nodded slowly. It's almost over. How do you feel? Lighter, she whispered, like my body is mine again. Poured tea and handed her a cup. They stood in silence, watching the sunlight rise between the distant towers. It had been a long few days. Emotions, silence, laughter, fear all mixed together. Now, with the storm clearing, there was one question that filled the quiet between them. What happens now? They spent the day cleaning the apartment. Caleb folded blankets and put away emergency lamps. Talia wiped the windows and organized the shelves. Every now and then their eyes met. No words were spoken, but there was a quiet understanding between them. Later, as they shared lunch, a soft chime echoed through the room. It was a message from the colony center. Lockdown officially lifted. All systems returning to normal. Outdoor. Movement allowed with safety gear for the next few hours. Caleb set down his spoon. We can go outside. Leah gave a small smile. Feels strange, doesn't it? Yeah, like we're leaving a bubble. She nodded. Quiet bubble that changed everything. They didn't go out right away. Instead, they sat by the window watching people move carefully below. Cleaning bots flew through the air. Neighbors waved at one another from balconies. Life had returned, but something inside the apartment felt different now. That evening, Caleb stepped into the hallway to check the building systems. Everything was working fine. When he returned, he found Leah sitting on the couch, holding something. In her hands was a small wooden box with symbols carved into it. "What's that?" Caleb asked. Leah opened the box. Inside was a glowing crystal the size of a pebble. "A bond stone," she said softly. "Every Falari carries one. It helps track emotional changes during our season." "It glows?" Caleb asked. "Only when the feeling becomes real," she said, looking down at it. "When it's more than instinct." He sat beside her. "And it's glowing now." "Yes," she whispered. He stayed quiet for a long moment. "Does that mean you're sure now?" "I'm sure about how I feel," Leah said, turning toward him. "But it's not just about me. It's about you too." Caleb looked at her with steady eyes. "I've never felt this close to someone before, not even with my own kind. Peaceful, honest, and real." Leah blinked slowly. "Then what do we do?" He took a deep breath. "We try. Slowly. Not because the season pushed us together, but because we choose to stay close even when it ends." Her ears twitched gently. "I would like that." The next day, Caleb went outside for a short walk. The sky was clearer now, and the air smelled fresh. He passed by other colonists, some human, some alien, all returning to normal life. He waved at a few people, but his mind stayed with the apartment tanned with Leah. When he returned, he found Leah brushing her fur and tying a soft cloth around her waist. She looked at him with a warm smile. "I told my sister about you," she said. Double quotes. "Oh," he asked, curious. Leah chuckled, but happy. "You said she wants to meet you someday." "I'd like that," Caleb said, smiling back. As the days passed, things slowly settled into a new normal. They cooked together, laughed more, and talked openly. But this time, there were no walls between them. They weren't just two people stuck in the same space. They were two hearts learning to grow together. One evening, Caleb stood by the window, watching the stars appear in the night sky. Leah joined him, standing quietly beside him. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "Just wondering how strange it is," he said, "that we had to get locked in together before we truly met." Leah nodded. "Sometimes strange things bring the right people together." He looked at her and smiled. "I'm glad it was you." "And I'm glad it was you," she replied. They stood there for a long time, side by side. Not needing to say anything more, somewhere in the sky above, the last cloud from the storm finally drifted away. 1 week after the storm ended, everything in the colony returned to normal. The streets were busy again. People moved freely, shops reopened, and laughter filled the air. Caleb watched it all from the apartment window, his thoughts quiet, and full life had continued, but not for him in the same way. Something inside had changed. He turned and looked at Leah. She was sitting on the floor, painting soft patterns on a sheet of fabric. Her hands moved carefully, her face calm. Her season had ended fully now. No more trembling, no more pressure in her voice. But something still remained, something deeper. "That looks beautiful," Caleb said. She looked up and smiled. "8. A gift. We usually give handmade things to someone we care about, something they can keep." He walked over and sat beside her. "Who's it for?" Leah paused. Then she looked at him and said softly, "You." Caleb blinked. "Me, yes," she said. "I wanted to wait until I was sure. Now I am." He looked at the fabric. It had a circle in the middle, with waves spreading outward, like ripples in water. "What does it mean?" "The symbol means peace," she said. "The kind that grows when two hearts trust each other." Caleb didn't know what to say. First, so he placed his hand gently on top of hers. Thank you, he said. That night, they sat outside for the first time since the storm. The sky was full of stars. Caleb brought 2 warm drinks, and Leah placed her handmade gift between them, letting the wind carry its scent. I've been thinking, Caleb said, watching the stars. What would happen if I applied to stay here? Longer. Leah turned toward him. You want to stay? I think so. Came here just for the program, but now I don't want to leave. She smiled gently. Then stay, just like that. Just like that, she said. You belong now. The next morning, Caleb submitted the request to extend his time on the colony. The system approved it within hours. His name was added to the local worker list. He found a job helping with education programs for young alien and human students. It was small work, but it made him happy. Days turned into weeks. Caleb and Leah kept growing closer. It's not just as friends, but as something new. It wasn't rushed or full of big words. It was quiet, strong, real. They still had their own spaces, still enjoyed time alone. But more often than not, they ended up in the same room, talking, sharing, just being together. One evening, a message arrived from Leah's homeworld. Her mother wanted to speak. You don't have to, Caleb said. If it's too soon. Right. Want to? Leah replied. They sat together in front of the screen. The call connected, and a graceful, older Falari woman appeared. Her fur was lighter, and her eyes kind. She studied Caleb for a long moment, then smiled softly. So you're the human my daughter chose to stay beside? Yes, ma'am, Caleb said, a little nervous. And you care for her, even though she is different from your kind? I do, Caleb said clearly. Not because she's Falari, but because she's her. Leah's mother nodded. Oh. That is enough for me. After the call ended, Leah touched Caleb's hand and said, You handled that well. I was scared, he admitted. You didn't show it. Good, he laughed. Time continued to pass. Caleb's work grew steady, and people in the colony began to know his name. Some smiled when they saw him and Leah walking side by side. Others whispered, but no one said anything unkind. In fact, many seemed curious, inspired. Even they were not just a story anymore. They were an example. One evening, Caleb brought home a small wooden box, shaped like a star. What's this? Leah asked. Open it. Inside was a stone similar to her bond stone, but smooth and simple. Carved on it was the same symbol she had painted. Peace. I wanted to give you something too, he said. Something to match yours. Leah held the stone to her chest and closed her eyes. This means more than you know. He smiled. I think I do know. As they sat together under the soft glow of the room's lights, Leah spoke gently. Never imagined this when you first walked through that door. Me neither, Caleb replied. You were just a human with a backpack and a nervous smile. And you were a quiet alien with walls around her heart. Leah laughed softly. And look at us now. They held each other's gaze for a long moment. No more storms, no more confusion. Just peace. Just them.